Welcome to Create More Intimacy, a podcast for men. I'm Elisa Stoddard, and I help successful men stop chasing sex and start building real connection so they finally feel close, connected, and wanted again. You did the right thing. You stayed calm when she brought up something that used to send you into a spiral. You didn't defend yourself. You didn't explain your way out of the discomfort. You just stood there and let it be uncomfortable, and you didn't make it about you. And she looks at you like she's waiting for the punchline. Not cold exactly, just unmoved, like she's seen this movie before and she's not ready to trust the ending yet. You go to bed that night, running the moment back, looking for the part where you get something for it. A softening, a word, anything that tells you the work you're doing is landing with her. And there's nothing there. Just the two of you in the same bed, exactly where you started. This is the part nobody prepares you for. You expect the hardest part to be doing the work, staying regulated, catching your old reaction before it takes over. Nobody told you the harder part comes after, when you're doing all of it correctly and getting no signal back, and you have to figure out what to do with all of that on your own. Welcome to episode 68, Living in the Gap. I want to be specific about this because vague language just makes it easier to misunderstand what's actually happening. The gap is the space between the man you're becoming and the trust that hasn't caught up yet. It's not a feeling, it's a stretch of ordinary days where you keep showing up differently and nothing outside of you confirms the work you've been doing. No credit, no visible shift in how she talks to you, no moment where she says, I see it, I see everything you're doing, I see how hard you're trying. Here's what that actually looks like in a week. You bite back the comment that would have started a fight 3 months ago, and she doesn't notice because there was no fight to compare it to. You ask her a real question about her day instead of retreating into your phone, and she answers in 4 words and goes back to what she was doing. You catch yourself getting defensive mid-sentence and actually stopped, and redirect, and she doesn't even look up. None of that is a failure. All of it is invisible, and invisible is exhausting in a specific way that failure isn't, because failure at least gives you something to fix. The gap gives you nothing to hold on to except your own word that you're doing the work you said you were doing. Most men can tolerate discomfort when there's a clear finish line. Work hard, get the promotion. Train consistently, see the results. The gap doesn't work that way. There is no scheduled date for when trust arrives. There is no metric that you can check. You're just supposed to keep being the man you've decided to be indefinitely, without anyone telling you that it's working. This is where a lot of men quietly start keeping score, even if they'd never say they were doing that out loud. I did this. I didn't do that. I've been consistent for 6 weeks now. Surely that counts for something. And the moment you start counting, you've already left the thing that actually matters, which is who you're being. And you've started measuring whether it's paying off yet. The gap isn't a punishment. It's just the actual shape of what rebuilding trust looks like from the inside. It's much slower and quieter than anyone would tell you, and almost nobody knows to warn you about what it does to your nervous system to keep showing up inside of all that without a reward. Here's the part that's harder to admit. When she doesn't respond the way you'd hoped, something in you goes looking for a different kind of proof, a better moment, a clearer signal. You find yourself doing more and saying more and trying to engineer the reaction you didn't get. This isn't weakness. It's what happens when you've spent years building your sense of yourself on outside evidence. At work, you know you're doing well because of the numbers and the reviews, the promotion. But at home, For a long time, you knew you were a good husband because she told you, or because things felt calm, or because she used to reach for you. You built your internal compass out of her responses without ever realizing that's what you were doing. So when her responses stop confirming anything, your compass has nothing to read. And instead of noticing that the compass itself was never yours to begin with, you go looking harder for a signal to point it at. You watch her face closer. You replay conversations for clues. You start needing her reaction the way you need water. Here's what makes this especially hard to catch. You can tell yourself you're not doing this for approval. You can genuinely believe you're just checking in, staying attuned, and being present. But there is a big difference between staying attuned to her and needing her attunement to feel steady in yourself. One is connection. The other is asking her to hold something that was never hers to carry. Let's slow down on what you're actually asking for in that moment, because I think it's easy to miss how much weight it carries. Picture the specific instant. You've just done the hard thing. You've held your ground without getting sharp, or you asked her about her day and actually listened to the answer instead of half tuning out. Something in you turns toward her, waiting. Not for a thank you necessarily, but for something quieter than that, like a sign that registers as, "You're doing okay," or "You're doing it right. Keep going. I see you." What you are asking her to do, though, in that moment is confirm your worth while she's still doing the work of deciding whether she's safe with you. Those two jobs cannot happen in the same person at the same time without one of them losing. She's trying to figure out, moment by moment, whether this version of you is real and whether it is safe to lower her guard again. That is already a full task. It uses up her attention, her nervous system, her caution. There isn't room left over in that same moment for her to also manage how you feel about yourself. This is not her failing you. It's simply not a job that fits inside the one she's already doing. Asking her to do both at once is a little like asking someone to hold your hand steady while she's still checking whether the ground underneath both of you is solid. She can't do the second thing safely until she trusts the first thing, and your need for reassurance right now is, without either of you meaning it this way, asking her to skip ahead. And here's the part that stings a little to hear. If your steadiness depends on her telling you you're doing well, then what you built this whole time wasn't steadiness. It was a request for reassurance dressed up as your own growth. That request, even if it's silent, even if you would never say those words out loud, I promise you she can feel it. People who are guarded can feel when someone needs something from them, and it reads, even wordlessly, as pressure. And pressure is the absolute last thing that makes anyone want to trust faster. There's a strange fairness problem hiding underneath all of this too, and most men can't name it, but you certainly feel it. You want her to trust the new version of you, but trusting the new version of you is exactly the risk she is still deciding whether to take. Every time you need her to confirm your growth before she's ready to, you're asking her to take that risk on your timeline instead of hers. You're still the one setting the terms, and that is the exact thing you're supposedly trying to stop doing. This is the part most men have never been taught, so let me just make it super concrete. Sourcing your own sense of worth doesn't mean pretending you don't care what she thinks, or performing indifference, or acting like her experience doesn't matter to you. That's just a colder version of the same problem, and it means building an internal reference point that doesn't collapse the moment she doesn't respond the way you'd hoped. Here's what that actually looks like, and it's probably much smaller than you would think. It happens in the 10 seconds right after the moment. not later that night, not in some structured review of your day. You handled something well. She doesn't react the way you'd hoped. And instead of immediately reaching for a way to get a different reaction out of her, you give yourself one sentence silently right there in that moment. Something as simple as, I stayed in the room for that, or I didn't make that about me. That's the entire practice. One true sentence about your own behavior, said just to yourself before you even look to her for her response. Most men skip this step entirely because it feels unnecessary or a little weird. You already know what you did, so why would you need to say it again? This is why it matters. If you don't consciously register it, the moment passes without a witness, and then your mind quietly defaults back to needing an outside one. The one-sentence habit isn't about tracking your progress. It's about making sure you are the first person to notice your own behavior before you go looking for someone else to notice it and validate it for you. Picture a man who's just 3 weeks into this. His wife asks him something pointed at dinner, something that used to make him shut down or get really sharp. He answers honestly, stays calm, and doesn't defend himself. He nods, changes the subject, and then the moment's just over. 10 years of old wiring would have him spending the rest of the night watching her for a sign that she noticed. Instead, walking back to load the dishwasher, he thinks the one sentence himself. That was different than how I used to handle that. And then he gets to let it go. Not because he doesn't care whether she noticed, but because he's no longer making her noticing the price of admission for believing it has value or that it happened. And over time, this changes something specific in how you carry yourself. You stop walking through your days scanning her face for evidence. You start walking through your days simply doing the thing and letting the doing be enough on its own, in the moment, when it happens. That shift from performing for a reaction to acting and moving on is the actual marker of change taking hold. It is quieter than anyone tells you, and it's also the only version of this that actually holds up over time because it doesn't require her to do anything at all. There's a second piece to this, and it's about how you interpret her reaction when it isn't what you'd hoped for. When she's guarded, when she tests you, when she brings something up you thought was resolved, that's information about where she is in her own process. It is not a verdict on whether your change is real. Those are separate questions, and most men collapse them into one because it is simpler to believe her response tells you the truth about yourself than to sit with the fact that her response is telling you about her. This distinction is the actual skill, not detachment, not performing calm you don't feel. The skill is being able to say internally, this is who I am right now, and her response today doesn't get to be a commentary on that. You can want her to come around. You can hope for it every single day, but you cannot let your hope for her response become the thing that decides whether you believe yourself. If you skip this step, here's where most men end up, and I want to say it plainly because it's a quiet trap rather than some dramatic failure. You keep doing the right things, but you do them louder. You start narrating your own growth to her, pointing out what you didn't do, explaining how far you've come, hoping if you just say it clearly enough, she'll finally give you the reaction you've been waiting for. This rarely works the way you hope. What she hears isn't growth. She hears someone still needing something from her, still making his healing her responsibility to confirm. Or maybe you go the other direction. You get tired of trying without a payoff, and something in you quietly starts resenting her for not catching up fast enough. You don't say it. You might not even fully know that's what you're doing, but it shows up as a flatness in how you treat her, like a subtle withdrawal of effort, a private thought that says, I've done my part. Why hasn't she done hers? That resentment is coercive precisely because it's invisible, and it usually shows up right as she is finally starting to soften, which resets the whole process. Both of these paths come from the same root. You never built the internal floor that lets you stand on your own account of yourself. You kept looking outward for something only you can actually give yourself. And when it doesn't come fast enough, either the need gets louder or it curdles into quiet bitterness. Neither of these is a character flaw. It's just what happens when a man tries to run on a fuel source that was never reliably his to draw from. The men who make it through this stage are not the ones who feel nothing when she doesn't respond. They still feel it, and it stings. The difference is they've built something else underneath the sting that doesn't collapse when that happens. They can feel disappointed and still know, very plainly, without needing her to confirm it, that they did what they said they would do. Here's the takeaway of this episode. You are not waiting for her to believe you so you can finally rest. You are learning to rest before she believes you, because that rest isn't hers to grant. That's a harder thing to build than patience. Patience just waits around. This is different. This is you deciding on your own, without a witness, without people clapping, that who you're being today is true, whether or not anyone else has caught up to it yet. If you want to talk through what this looks like in your specific marriage, not the general version, but exact conversations and moments that you're living through right now, I'm hosting a free webinar, What She Stopped Saying, on August 20th. It's at 11 a.m. Pacific, noon Mountain, 1 Central, and 2 Eastern. You can save your seat at elisastoddard.com. I'd love to have you there. And if you'd rather talk it through directly, you can book a 30-minute relationship clarity call at elisastoddard.com. We will look at exactly what's happening, what I think is possible, and whether it makes sense to work together or not. I will make sure that you leave with more clarity than you came in with. One final thing, I want you to know you don't need her to tell you it's real. You already know. See you next time. Thanks for being here. If something in this episode hit home, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. It helps more men find the support they need. And if you are ready to get help or take the next step, you'll find the link to book a free call in the show notes. I'll see you next time.